day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webcast entitled The 5 Key Factors PR Agency Acquires for an Acquisition Candidate. Today's conversation is brought to you by the Stevens Group and powered by OnStream Media. To submit a question or comment at any time during the webcast, simply type your message in the box and click Ask. All questions will be answered at the end of today's discussion. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host, Rich Agecny, Senior Partner of the Stevens Group. Rich, the floor is yours.
Well, I want to first thank everyone for coming today. Hope what we have to share with you will be of use to you in your own PR practices. Our guest today is a member of a very small and elite group of PR agency leaders who need no introduction. But I've decided to give him one anyway. Peter Finn is a founding managing partner of Finn Partners. Peter founded in Partners in 2011. And while his firm's revenues at the time were roughly a healthy $18 million a year, in 7 short years, he has far more than quadrupled the size of the firm. Today, he rides over an agency with more than $80 million in fee income, with 600 team members and 16 offices in the U.S. and around the world. ComPro and the Stevens Group are pleased to have Peter Finn as our guest this afternoon. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Rich. I'm happy to be here.
Peter, you've clearly been one of the more aggressive acquirers of PR firms since you started Finn Partners. In the beginning, as you look ahead at growing your business, how did your experience as an agency owner in the past inform the development of your overarching M&A strategy for the future growth of Finn Partners?
Well, we launched Finn Partners by separating from my prior agency. We had a negotiated separation, and we started with 150 people and 10 founding managing partners. What I had learned in my prior agency experience is that it's in the end, it's really all about talent. So I had made acquisitions in my prior agency. My focus in those acquisitions is always about finding the right talent with the right expertise, helping us in certain geographies. So I had years of working on acquisitions, working on acquisition opportunities, making acquisitions that really set the groundwork for me, laid the groundwork for me to move forward with our growth plans for Finners.
I see. Well, as a leader of a top 5 independent PR firm with significant resources, particularly since the announcement of your joint venture with Stagwell Media back in September of 2016. Has your M&A strategy remained the same, or has it changed from when you first started Finn Partners in 2011? And let me ask you that. If it has changed, how has it changed and why?
Yeah. So our criteria in evaluating acquisition opportunities has remained constant. As Finn Partners has changed, our needs have changed, and therefore the decision-making process has evolved. I think you know, Rich, that we get many, many more acquisition opportunities than I can pursue. I guess we've become known as an acquirer, and at this point I'm getting a new acquisition opportunity every other week, so I get more, 2 dozen a year or even more than that, and we actually make 4 acquisitions a year. So most of the opportunities that come my way, I pass on, but we do have a set of criteria that have been consistent from the beginning in terms of how we decide what's the right fit for us.
Well, since you brought us, Peter, suspect if I went through my list of questions, you would be answering the question I'm now going to ask you, given you brought this up. But what are your criteria? I mean, that is the topic for discussion today. So why don't we deal with that now, and we'll get on with some of the other questions I want to ask you.
So we have 5 different criteria, very important, and we don't need to have every single one of these be a fit for us to decide to move forward with an opportunity, but they are all important. And one of the most important criteria is whether the specialty focus of the firm and the geography of the firm is a fit for our strategic goals. And our strategic goals have evolved over time as we've gotten bigger. The geography that I focus on has changed. Specialty needs have also changed. So that's a very important one, and that is whether the special focus and geographic fit it fits our strategic goals. Number 2, financial stability and no client concentration. An agency that has 50% of their business with one client is a scary situation that we probably will stay away from, unless there's a very special reason why we should pursue that. We look for a consistent history of profits and healthy growth. So an agency with anemic profits and no growth, unlikely we're going to be interested in that opportunity. But, there's no hard and fast rules, but these are generally the things we look for. We look for a healthy balance sheet, and for us what that means is that net asset value on the balance sheet should be at least 2 times the prior year's average monthly fee. And finally, the 5th element, this is probably a make it or break it element. I didn't start with this, but unless there's a cultural fit, we're not going to pursue it. And there have been some very interesting acquisition opportunity firms that are in specialties that are important to us, geographies that are important to us, that we've walked away from because we didn't feel there was a cultural fit. We have a very clear set of core values, founding core values, and unless I feel the management team, the acquired firm, really is in sync with those values, we're not going to pursue an opportunity. Last, I'll say it's not one of our 5 key elements that we look for in a potential acquisition, but something else that can be very important is if there are opportunities to consolidate overhead with the acquired firm and consolidate the business into our agency, that's a significant plus. And if all or most of the other things we look for are there, that can be an important factor that distinguishes that opportunity from others that we're looking at.
Okay. Hey, with respect to you were talking about the spread and not having agencies not having a concentration of revenue with any 1 or 2 clients. What in your mind is much? I mean, what would be if a client if an agency had a client that represented what percent of his or her business would be too much of an imbalance, too much of a risk for you?
Well, our largest client is about 3% of our fees, and that's what we'd like it to be. Now, most agencies are 3%. Our largest client is 3% of our fees, but that's unusual. I'd say if a client is more than 20% of the fees, then I'm going to be concerned about that. 10, 15 is okay. 50 is really way too much. So over 20, the bigger the percent, the more worried I am. Now, I have to tell you, though, there was a great acquisition opportunity that I was pursuing about 1.5 years ago, and they had a client that represented probably 40% of their business, but it was a long-term client. They had very strong relationships with the client, and it was a premier brand name client. So I decided to overlook the client concentration issue. It turns out that acquisition opportunity didn't work out. But so in all of these, there's no hard and fast rule. These are general guidelines, but every opportunity I evaluate based upon the overall picture.
you did say, though, that your strategy, your acquisition strategy has changed over time as the firm has changed. Can you unpack that for me, please? How has it changed? In other words, from when you started in 2011 till now, what changes are you referring to, and what has led to your reconsideration of your selection of acquisitions?
Okay, so I'll give you some concrete examples. When we launched Fin Partners, technology was our biggest practice area. It is our biggest practice area today. When I say technology, I mean working for clients in the tech sector. But we were an $18 million firm when we were planning to launch a Fin Partners, and technology was probably, $6 or $7 million of that. I knew, so some of our clients, tech clients, and tech companies that we were talking to that were looking for an agency were looking for support in Europe and in Asia. And the fact that when we launched Fin Partners, we had an office in Jerusalem, and that's an office focused mainly on tech, but we had no offices outside the U.S. besides that. So I knew that I needed to expand our presence overseas, specifically to serve tech clients. So one of our early acquisitions was of an agency in London that had offices in Paris and Munich, that tech agency. More recently, we've acquired an agency in Singapore that an agency focused on B2B. So now we're over $25 million in tech. And there's always more to do. We will acquire more agencies focused on the tech sector, but I've covered some of our needs. So we're most likely not going to acquire another tech PR firm in London. I'm not going to acquire another tech PR firm in Singapore. Now, we may look for agencies elsewhere in Asia or in Europe that would complement what we've already done, but some of those needs I've already met. So in the beginning, tech was our highest priority. Tech continues to be important to us, but we've covered a lot of that ground. Recently, we acquired, so travel is an important practice for us. We started Fin Partners in practice. Jamaica Tourist Board was a long-term important client of ours. And we acquired M. Silver, a New York agency focused on the travel sector. This is an opportunity that Art helped on. They had an office in Fort Lauderdale. That strengthened our U.S. tech practice. Early this year, we acquired strengthened our travel practice. Early this year, we acquired a firm called the Brighter Group in London, a fantastic agency in London focused on the travel sector. And now we have the beginning of a global travel. We can support in the U.S. We acquired Lane about a year and a half ago in Portland, Oregon. They had a New York office. They do some work in the travel sector. Now I'm looking at Asia, looking at the travel sector in Asia. And I will continue to look at opportunities to strengthen our travel practice and make it more of a global office. And so on. So as we've evolved, as I've filled some of the early needs we've had, I look at extending those or extending other practices the way I've extended tech travel.
Mm-hmm. Given our viewers and my review of them, of the list of those who registered for the event today, you're talking to a lot of agency CEOs who own firms that are much, much, much smaller than yours. If you were the CEO of a much smaller firm, a firm doing, say, anywhere from $2.5 million to, say, and this is on the high side, given the list, I saw the rest of this, doing $10 million in client fee income. What critical factors would you be taking into consideration before making to either acquire a firm or sell your firm to a bigger player like Fin Partners? For example, if your goal was growth,
so I think that an agency owner has to be really clear about their goals. I wouldn't make an acquisition just for the sake of making an acquisition. I think that the agency CEO should have a clear picture of where he or she wants to evolve to, and then evaluate acquisition opportunities against those goals. I think that agency owners need to think about the risk. There's risk acquisition. We've been fortunate that ours have worked out well, but I've heard stories of companies that have made acquisitions that have gone horribly wrong and created huge turmoil for the acquirer. In some cases, actually putting them out of business. So one piece of advice is think clearly about what your goals are. Number two is be cautious, and I would say problem acquire a firm that's more than 25 to 35% of the size of your business. The acquirer should be larger enough that it's clear that the culture of the acquiring firm is going to be the surviving culture and the practices, and I think that also limits the risks. If you acquire a firm that's too close to your own size, you get involved in far more risks. So those, and of course, then look at the issues that I talked about before: the financial facility, client concentration, profit and growth history. What does the balance sheet look like? Is there a cultural fit? Is it a strategic fit in terms of specialty and geographic goals that you have? And are there opportunities to consolidate overhead? So those are all the things I would advise a CEO of a smaller agency to think about when looking at potential acquisition. In terms of the other side, if they're thinking of selling, there have been agency owners who have said to me, either I need to start acquiring or I need to sell, that I need more scale because I can't get into the opportunities that I want to get into, or I'm losing out on pitches that I shouldn't be losing out on, but the reason I'm losing out on them is because I don't have all the resources I need. So they've said to me, either we're going to acquire those resources or we need to join a larger agency to tap into those resources. What I would say there, if you're thinking of selling, probably the number one factor, well, two factors. One, make sure you really want to do this. That's important. Think about it carefully. Make sure this is something you want to do. Secondly, I would say make sure there's a cultural fit. Because if there's not a cultural fit, it's not going to work out. There's somebody I talked to recently who told me that she was very far along in negotiating the sale of her agency, where she'd spent a lot of money on legal fees and negotiating contracts, and at the very last minute, she said, you know what, it's been horrible dealing with the owners in this sale process, and they're probably being nice to me now. And after the sale, they're not going to be so nice. And so if it's horrible now, this is not a good stuff. She canceled the discussions and terminated the planned sale. So I'd say making sure there's a cultural fit is really important.
You know, this is probably a better question for a corporate psychologist. But my partner, Art Stevens, and I come in contact with a number of agency owners who have really thought through as you put it, that have clarity about their goals in terms of in terms of wanting to sell their firm, and they have good business reasons for doing it. So there's clarity there. We find also, and I wonder how you manage this. If you're talking to a firm that you really like, and they have all the right business reasons for selling, and they thought through their business reasons, but there's still there's a part of them that says, I used to work for a firm. I don't want a boss. I like running my own business. I've learned that even if I have a small PR firm, as Art Stevens points out in a feature article he wrote for one of the trades, you can have a small firm generating $1.5 million, $2 million in client fee income, and you could be pulling a good piece of business. And so you're hungry. You're paying your bills. You're putting money in the bank. You're sending your kids to college. And despite the business reasons, which are evident, the seller or the agency CEO, I should say, decides not to sell. Or he says to us, "We'll come back and talk to me in 2 or 3 years."
Right.
What would you say? I realize you're not a corporate psychologist, but what are your thoughts on that issue?
Well, look, I think that agency owners need to decide what their goals are. If what they want is to run their business, maintain a certain lifestyle, and they don't have goals otherwise to grow the business that require either that they firms or that they sell to the agency, that's fine, and they need to be clear that that's what they want. I have run into this for sure. I've had some good conversations with agency owners who have been interested in the possibility of making a deal with me, and then in the end have decided not to pursue it. So, as I mentioned earlier, I get lots of acquisition opportunities, far more than I can possibly pursue. So what I generally do is I am reluctant to invest time in an opportunity unless the CEO has hired an advisor to help them find the right buyer, because then I know they're serious. So almost all acquisitions we make are a result of an advisor to a CEO approaching me and saying, "I'm representing this firm, they're looking for a buyer, we think you would, might be a good fit." Then I'm going to invest time in it because I know they're serious. They're not going to spend money to hire an advisor unless they're serious. So I think that agency owners need to decide what they really want. If they are serious about selling, don't try and do it yourself, because you don't know what the opportunities, what's going to be a good offer, what's not a good offer. You don't know who all the potential acquirers are. So my advice is hire an advisor, who will help make sure you find out about the right opportunities and that you get a good offer, you get a fair deal. And I'm not going to make a plug for any particular advisor.
I understand. Nor will I. Nor will I. Peter, you're playing beautifully into my scripted question flow here.
Okay.
You'll see why in a second. In general, I'm talking in general, what are the upsides and downsides of size if you own a PR firm?
Okay. Well, the upside of size is that you have far more resources you can bring to a pitch or to a client. If a client needs support in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, you've got that. We have lots of accounts that are shared across offices. We have lots of accounts that are shared across specialty areas. We just got an opportunity today for a health tech opportunity. So our health practice and our tech practice are collaborating on that. We've been winning a lot of health tech business recently, and that's a relatively new practice area. This morning I found out about a travel tech client we just won, our second travel tech client in our London office, and that's a result of collaboration between the travel practice and the tech practice. And tech is touching more and more parts of our life these days, so it's an important point of collaboration for a lot of different practice areas. So the advantages of our size are all the resources you could bring to bear. Digital and creative is a specialty that every agency feels a need to offer to events today. Digital and creative is a big, complicated sector. It's many different things, and I can take you through it if you'd like to know, but you can't hire a digital person and have that covered. It's many different aspects. We've got 100 people in digital and creative. We started Fin Partners in late 2011 with one digital person. Now we have 100, and we have that many because there are so many different areas of expertise required for digital creative, and we need this in different geographies. So these are the things that scale brings, all these different resources. The advantage of being smaller is that the CEO just can make a decision unilaterally. In a bigger agency, I can tell you I don't make decisions unilaterally. We make decisions collaboratively here, and I'm comfortable with that. But if somebody is not comfortable with a collaborative decision-making process, they might be happier with a smaller agency.
So is it just that simple? It comes down to whether or not you're the collaborative type?
Well, I think it's how important you feel the need for broader resources and how much independence and autonomy you want. You want to be able to make all the decisions yourself, then you're better off staying independent, and if that means being a smaller agency, then so be it. If you're comfortable being part of a larger team and making decisions together, then I think, and you feel for more resources, then being part of a bigger agency is the right avenue for you.
No. This is another two-part question. In general, what advice would you give the CEOs in our audience who are scrambling to find top talent in either industry-specific categories like consumer products or tech, for example, or top talent in the digital interactive space? And specifically, when is making an acquisition of a firm or selling your firm to a bigger agent the formula for adding the top talent firm needs to grow? It's like client demand and or to compete for new business than trying to do it organically.
Okay, so let me talk about first from the acquirer's point of view, my point of view, the advantages and disadvantages of the organic approach versus acquisition. Most of the firms we've acquired have been in business for 15, 20 years, some cases 25 years, and it's taken that long. It takes a long time to get all the pieces in place for an agency: the right team, client base, the right business methodology, the right story, the right methodology for serving your clients. This is not something, in a specialty area that you can do overnight. So what I have said to myself when we've acquired a firm in a new market or in a new specialty area is I don't have 15 years or 20 years to develop what this agency developed, what this entrepreneur developed him or herself over a long period of time. Because I have ambitious goals for Fin Partners. I have goals for Fin Partners to have global reach and to be well respected in major markets around the world in key specialty sectors. So it would take time that I just don't have. And I started Fin Partners when I was in my late 50s. So I needed to move quickly to achieve my goals. And now we have created some new specialty areas organically. We were able to hire an extraordinary person 3 years ago, and he's done a phenomenal job. And health is now one of our biggest practice areas. And just this year, we were named Health Agency of the Year by the Holmes Report, which is fantastic for us. And that has been accomplished largely organically, although some of the firms we've acquired have had some health business. But in so many of the practice areas that we've developed and so many of the geographies that we've entered, it really would have been impossible for us to accomplish the same thing in the same time frame organically. When I launched Fin Partners, I mentioned earlier that tech was our biggest practice area, and we had a number of tech clients that were clients of our U.S. operation that needed support in London. This was just part of what it was clear to them they needed. Mm-hmm. So what we did is we hired somebody with a tech expertise to start a London office for us. and she hired another, one person, then two people. And after a year, we had 5 people in London, and we had maybe 8 or 9 clients. But, that's having 5 in London is not, today we have over 50 people. So it's hard to compete for accounts when you're 5 people. And there are many agencies out there with a lot more expertise, a lot more depth. So we acquired Tech Agency, and we've acquired 2 other agencies since, and now we have a very robust, fantastic office in London with offices in Paris, Munich, and Frankfurt also that are all part of our European operation. So that gives you a comparison of what it's like to try and do it organically. We tried to start off moving into London and Europe organically, and then within 3 or 4 years, I guess 4 years since our first acquisition there, now we have about 70 people in Europe, over 50 in London, over 70 in Europe. So you can do it organically, and sometimes it can work. The problem is organically, you don't, when you hire a senior person to either build a practice or start a practice, you don't always make the right choice. And the question is, can you afford to lose a year or 2 or 3 to discover you've made a mistake and then start over again? Whereas so the advantages of making an acquisition is all the pieces are in place. There's a team in place, a client base in place, and you can see that they have been successful in building and sustaining a business. So it's really all about speed, how quickly you want to accomplish the goals you've set out for yourself. Now, digital, did you ask me about digital also? I can talk about that.
I did, yeah. Category specific and digital, yeah.
Yeah. Digital is complicated. So one of the things we've learned, we have a team of 100 agency working what we call digital and creative, because so much of digital involves creative. And I made a list, which I can read to you, of all the different skills that we need. Why people say, why do you have 100 people? Well, I'll read you my list and you'll see why, and then we need people in different geographies. So we need somebody to manage that whole digital and creative team for us. But then we need project managers. We need salespeople who can meet with clients and prospects, explain what our solution is to them, and give the client confidence that we can actually deliver for them. We need people who can handle the strategy for digital and creative assignments, social media management, search engine optimization, insights and analytics, creative for digital and for traditional channels, video, website design and development and programming, branding, digital media. And that's a lot of different things that fall into what we call digital or digital and creative. I tell the senior team at Fin Partners, we have 24 different business units, which are different offices and are bigger offices. The offices are divided into specialty areas. And what I tell our senior team is that no one business unit can afford to have all these different talents that are required for digital and creative. Fin Partners could afford to have them all, so we have a global digital and creative that we make available to all of our different business units, but we couldn't afford to build all of this out in any one office. Now, none of this comes for free. It all costs. We spend a lot of money on salaries and on tools. We spend a lot of money on tools, digital tools, and so we need to get our clients to pay for this. So often, we acquire joins us because they want to tap in to all these resources. And what's important, one of the things I need to help them understand that the clients and prospects don't get this for free. They can get it. The teams at Nest can tap into these for new business pitches without having to pay for it. But we're not going to put a big digital team together for a $10,000 a month opportunity. The digital teams are going to put more time and energy into our bigger opportunities. But nonetheless, the firms that join us can tap into this large, complicated team that we've built on an as-needed basis, and then our joint goal is to try and get their clients to set aside budgets for this, which often we're very successful in.
Well, you come out of a tradition. I've often heard the Finn name referred to in the context of a dynasty, a PR dynasty. In many ways you are, and you come out of a tradition of having seen agencies get big. Your father's firm, your firm, prior to starting Finn Partners and so forth, is part of your DNA to own and be part of a large firm. If you're a man or woman starting out in business, you want to start your own business, or you've been in business for a few years, it's kind of analogous to the relationship people have with their financial advisor. And the financial advisor will ask you, well, how risk tolerant are you? And you give them, you can give them a little background about who you are and what you're willing to do and not do. But given the way the public relations industry is marching forward, there's no question that having a digital presence, having an interactive capability, and as broadly as define that is critical. I don't see, frankly, how you run a firm or expect to grow a firm unless you're looking in that direction. I'm not saying that the legacy traditions are something to leave behind, not for a minute. But you're not looking ahead at what you as an owner are doing and need to be doing in the digital space, in the interactive space. I can't see how you can expect to go past a certain point. What advice would you give our listeners with respect to this issue of risk tolerance? I mean, you're running a $5 million firm, and you know you need to do X, Y, and Z. You talked about search engine optimization, data analytics, app development, website development, and on you go. You have a list. What do you invest? Did you invest first, or is it your belief that you have to have the business in place first before you make the investment? I mean, it's a chicken and egg thing.
Yeah, so we invested first. We knew we needed this, and so we started hiring a few people first, just because you can't even have a conversation without having some of that talent in-house. So my advice would be, if you can make one hire for a smaller agency, if you don't make one hire in the digital space, it would probably be somebody who can handle the strategy and the sales with clients. Don't hire a website programmer to start with. Hire somebody who can help you sell it to your clients, help come up with the plans for clients, and then you can outsource the implementation. And then as you get more of that business, you can stop outsourcing and you can, start to bring some of those. And actually what we did is we had a bunch of freelancers we were working with, and we started hiring some of those freelancers or replacing the freelancers with full-time employees. Start with one full-time hire, and then that person started hiring a few people as we got assignments. You got to be prepared to make some investments, and my advice is going to be start off with somebody who can help you with selling the services to your clients and come up with a strategy for the programs.
Which begs the question, with respect to working with freelancers or in some way partnering with if you don't have the in-house capability, partnering with a firm that does have the digital chops that you need to handle your client demands. But there has to be a difference. And I know there is. There's clearly a difference between continuing to stay connected to your suppliers and know that they'll be there, or at least hope they'll be there when the need arises, and having the capability in-house. What are the pros and cons of course, the pros, of course, is that you'll maintain this overhead. If you don't have FTE doing you have to feed. But what's the downside of continuing to service clients with other agencies, so with partners, with freelancers, et cetera?
Well, the problem, so look, you're absolutely right. The downside of building the department in-house is you have a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of overhead to carry, and there's risk there. The advantage is that if it's in-house, then the management team for the agency can set the priorities and can say, this is a really important pitch, drop everything else you're doing, you got to work on this, or this is a really important client. And this client really needs this now, so you've got to put this ahead of everything else. If it's an outside firm, they may say, can't do that. I've got other clients I've got to take care of or other pitches I'm working on. So the decision making is different. So those are the pluses and minuses, and there are pluses and minuses, but no question about it.
Yeah. What would you say roughly is the portion of your firm's M&A budget that goes to acquiring agencies in specific industry categories like healthcare, tech, et cetera, and in specific geographical locations, versus acquiring agencies mainly for their tactical expertise, particularly as we've been talking about, in digital and interactive disciplines?
Well, I don't know that I can say that there's a certain part of my M&A budget assigned to one or the other. Really, a more accurate description would be that I just evaluate every opportunity that comes my way against all the criteria I talked about before, which would include geography, specialty area, and also tax that the firm would bring different partners. And even if a firm is a digital firm and does the same thing that we already do, well, I'm going to look at what industry sector they focus in. We being a digital firm doesn't mean you can do digital for everybody. It doesn't mean you could, doing digital work for B2B, for tech, B2B tech, or travel or consumer. Those are not the same thing. So, I'm looking at every opportunity and weighing it against where our needs are to get our practices and offices to where I want them to be. So I can't answer the question, is there a certain percent that's devoted to buying digital or technical firms?
Okay, but would you say that when you were saying earlier that you get 2 or 3 inquiries every couple of weeks from advisors like the Stevens Group, the firms that are looking to sell, you need to make a decision, which ones to see and which ones to take a pass on. Do you ever look at, are you more inclined, I should say, to look at a digital marketing firm just to see what bells and whistles they can bring or add to your already robust digital marketing practice within Fin Partners, versus knowing right away whether this is a category we want to be in, this is a category where we have more than enough people to handle any business that comes our way? Is the digital remain for you something of a question mark still, because it's continually evolving?
Yeah. Well, I think there's no question digital is important, and when I come across a digital opportunity, and I have several right now that I'm looking at, those rise to the top of the pile as very interesting opportunities. I still have to look at all the other criteria we talked about, though, and sometimes I find that the owners of digital firms are convinced that they're going to be the next Google, and they're not realistic in terms of what the value of their firm is. So they need to, live with it independently for a while, another, 3, 4, 5 years, and then see if they actually turn into a Google, or if in fact they're really in the agency business and they're valued the way other agency business are valued.
Well, you said before, pardon me, allergies. You said before that if you're a smaller firm, the first decision you would make, if you could only make one, the first hire, you would make if you could only make one, would be someone who can think strategically, someone in the digital marketing space with strong digital marketing chops, who can handle strategy. What exactly do you mean? Whose strategy?
Well, so
where does that strategy originate from within the firm?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is somebody who can meet with a client or a prospect, understand what their problems are, what their goals are, and come up with an effective plan to meet their goals. So somebody who understands enough about the digital world to understand which tools to use, what resources they need, and come up with an integrated plan, and then present that to the client in such a way where the client says, you know what, this is a great plan. We're going to move forward with it. So I think if you don't have that, hiring, the people who do the work isn't going to help. You have to be able to get the work. So the strategy person is going to help you get the work and develop the plan to implement for the client. You're not going to get the work unless you come up with a winning plan. So that's what I meant by the strategist. Somebody, if you're looking to move into digital, and I think every agency who isn't already offering digital services knows that they need to do that, you need to hire somebody who understands the whole digital landscape and can present the plan to the client and convince the client to move forward, and then you can hire outside resources, buy outside resources to handle the implementation.
Well, to your point there, you're an agency with 600 people. You have 100 people dedicated to digital. So, again, there are a lot of mouths to feed. You have a tremendous client base. Where are you seeing the point at which digital and other PR services, I'll just, a suitcase term I'll use for those services is legacy services. Where are those fits the most obvious, where the digital and the legacy teams are sitting down and talking strategically together on the client project? Where does that happen most often? It's probably on the app development. It's probably content driven or something along those lines. Would you not say?
Well, it's really on the larger clients. For the smaller clients with smaller budgets, it's hard to provide them with the traditional PR support that they require, in fact, and also to offer them meaningful digital support. Digital work, it takes a budget, and if a client is spending, $10,000 or $15,000 a month, even $20 a month, it's hard to offer them, really robust PR support and robust digital support. Where we find the best integration is when we have clients that are spending $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, or $2 million. That's where it works the best. What's happening here is now we have to support all of our clients in one way or another. So we do provide digital support even for many of the smaller clients. Sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes it's moderately difficult. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes It works really well. But what we're finding is our digital team is now actually going out and winning assignments where they're not competing with another PR firm. They're competing with an ad agency or a digital firm, and they're winning a $500,000 or $1 million assignment that is not PR-led, but digital-led. And those are fantastic opportunities for us. So that's an important step in our evolution. So our digital team is operating both as a digital standalone agency, digital/creative agency. Some of the assignments are advertising assignments. A lot of the advertising would be digital advertising. But they're also working collaboratively with the PR and providing digital support on PR programs. So that's the next step in the evolution when the digital team is strong enough that they can actually compete with standalone digital agencies or ad agencies and win assignments, big assignments that are digital first.
Then would you say that, to your point earlier about hiring someone first who understands your business, who understands the public relations business, that was a lot harder to do 10 years ago. I worked in a firm that bought a digital marketing. Well, they weren't digital marketing, actually. They were strictly a digital development firm. And they came to our offices. We were a large public relations firm. And they came to our offices and they took fees. And they had absolutely no idea what we did for a living. And it was almost impossible to bridge that gap. So that those who really knew how to use the technology also knew why our clients, or could understand why our clients were hiring us in the first place. When you make a hire, you already have the strategists. You already have people who are client-facing, who can talk the PR talk with the client at a new visitation. But if you're a smaller firm, it seems to me what you're saying is that it's important to have the strategy person first, and then you decide or continue to build your department, your digital department, one at a time, or through an acquisition, or you can start looking for people who have specific kinds of technical ability, rather than folks that are naturally who understand the PR business, who can talk strategy, who know how to implement it consistent with the needs of the client.
Yeah, I mean, the one exception would be is if the CEO of the firm is him or herself digitally savvy and understands enough about, what a program for a client could or should look like, can develop that plan and sell it to the client, then you can hire the people to do the implementation. But if the CEO or nobody in the management team has that expertise, before you start hiring people to do the work, you've got to have somebody who understands the full picture of what can be done and is able to develop a plan and explain it to clients or prospects and convince them to move forward with you.
Well, let me ask you a question that you talked about this before. In what foreign countries or cities do you feel it's essential for your firm and for PR agencies in general to have a brick and mortar presence, and why?
Well, I talked about London earlier. When I started Fin Partners, I knew we had clients and prospects that were looking for support in London, Europe/London, and in Asia. I don't know if everybody listening in on the webinar knows this, but if you look at the ranking data that's available, London is one of the markets where more money is spent with agencies than almost anywhere else in the world. Markets where a lot of money is spent with agencies: New York, London, Washington, D.C. So those are, there are other markets that are, of course, important, but those are markets where there's a large concentration of client money spent with agencies. We were in New York and Washington to start with, but I focused on building my Washington office. I had 10 people in Washington when we launched Fin Partners. We're now almost 70 people in Washington. And London, we had nothing. Asia is another very high priority. Asia is a big place, a lot of different places to invest in Asia. We decided to make Singapore our Asia Pacific headquarters. And many companies do that, many clients do that. Some decide Australia should be the the company headquarters for Asia Pacific. Some focus more on China. For me, something that was very important is that we wanted, an advantage of Singapore was that English is the primary language. Everybody there speaks English. Business customs and practices are very similar to what I'm used to in the U.S. And the people there, business people in Singapore, understand Asia Pacific. They provide services often or working with clients throughout Asia Pacific, but I find it very easy to work with them. Working with an office in Hong Kong can be similar. I chose Singapore. Mainland China, the language becomes more complicated, and the business practices are not necessarily the same. So Asia Pacific is very important. We decided to start with Singapore, and that is our Asia Pacific headquarters. And for the same reason, London is our headquarters for Europe. English is their primary language, so it is their language, and business laws and customs are accounting methods, all the same or very similar to ours, so it's easy for us. So that's why London and Singapore are our two areas of initial focus, and will continue to be for long term very important for us.
Oh, well, Peter, thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to you. Just to close, based on what we've been discussing for the past hour, as it relates to the mergers and acquisitions world, what advice would you give that you haven't already given? Do you have any additional thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers with respect to their consideration of making an acquisition or selling, and when to know it's the right thing to do, and when to hold off if it may not be?
Well, look, one of the things that I would say about somebody who's thinking about making an acquisition is make sure you have the stomach for it. But, if you're an owner of a firm, you've already got the stomach for dealing with risk and anxiety and, the ups and downs of business. But there is additional risk involved in making acquisitions. One of the things that we do is I try to build into our acquisition proposals a downside protection. So if things do, I try and anticipate what might go wrong and build into our proposal a clear understanding of both sides of how we will handle those situations if they were to develop. Another thing I would say is once I've met with a firm that we're interested in and we decide to move forward, often I'll have to see some financial information to the next step. We sign a non-disclosure agreement. Then we look at some financial information, and I develop a detailed acquisition proposal, which usually runs 6 to 10 pages, single space. It's very detailed, and I often get the reaction, wow, you've covered everything. And that's what I try and do. I try and cover everything, all the different scenarios we have to deal with, how the seller will benefit from success, how we will protect ourselves from things that might go wrong, how we will work together, what our mutual responsibilities and opportunities are. So that would be another piece of advice, is if you're going to make a proposal, don't just do it back of the envelope, a proposal or a paragraph saying, here's my proposal. Think it through carefully and try and put down in writing a well thought out plan of how you would work together with the acquired company.
And what about from the seller's perspective? What are your parting thoughts there?
Well, I already said make sure there's a cultural fit. I think also get a detailed proposal. Ask a lot of questions. We've done 12 acquisitions since I've launched Fin Partners, and I'm very happy with the way they've gone. I'm not going to say there have been no bumps. Of course, there in life and in business there are always problems that have to be dealt with, but we're pretty good at resolving problems. And one of the things that's key to our success is, I mentioned earlier in today's call that Fin Partners was launched with 10 founding managing partners. So for every acquisition we make, multiple members of our founding managing partners team are responsible for the integration of the acquired company. So it's a team effort, and that's the key to the success. So again, advice to the seller, make sure that there's a cultural fit, ask a lot of questions, and think through how the integration will be handled, both from your end and from the buyer's end. And make sure you like the people you're making a deal with.
Well, Peter, thank you very, very much for your time today. Thank you, everyone who has watched this and listened to this webcast. We hope you got something of value out of it. I've been asked to make a brief announcement that the folks at Compro look forward to seeing you on future events, as do we at the Stevens Group. The next webcast will be hosted by the managing partner of the Stevens Group, Art Stevens, and our guest will be Grace Leon, CEO and partner at Hunter Public Relations. So tune in. It'll be sometime mid-June. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you, Rich.
You're welcome.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webinar. We thank you for your participation. You may disconnect your lines at this time. Have a wonderful day.